I wanted to talk a little bit about the business school, if we could, today. And I'm coming at this from the perspective of a client. You probably know Trinity College, around the corner, 52 acres in the middle of the city. And the business school is just at the tip of the first blue arrow, not too far away from the railway line there, on the site of the old Loose Hall. And I'm also going to put out an apology here at the start if I insult anybody in the room who are practitioners in the BIM field, architects, engineers, builders. It's a whole heap of you here. And if I do gravely insult you, I'm sure it won't be for the first time. Trinity has, like I said, 52 acres in the middle of the city, but we've got a fairly decent, I suppose, vintage in the city as well. With about, a couple of 100-year-old buildings, a few 200-year-old buildings, and a few 300-year-old buildings. And might also challenge the principle that BIM is actually better suited for modern buildings. In fact, some of the work we're doing on some of the historic buildings in making digital twins of them is actually working out quite well. The reason being is we can actually pick the stuff the user wants, the clients want, and we're not fussing around with finding out how many tons of steel are in the basement and trying to employ people to strip that back at a later stage and spending a fortune on it. So about 2 million visitors come across the threshold of the campus every year, and about 1 million visit the Book of Kells and a whole lot of people in between. So it's the size of a decent-sized town, I suppose. But we've got a good capital building programme as well. About 1.4 billion on the go at the moment. One of the papers in the pack showed 285 million. I think that might have been an earlier stab at the strategic plan total. It's about 470 million in the first few projects to see there. And the big one here, Trinity, at Grand Canal Dock, will be one of our smart cities attempts to build a 5.5-acre campus down at TTech. Our first foray into BIM was the medium voltage project in the bottom right, which was a civil engineering click and forget BIM job for me. 10.5 million on time and on budget, and I have to say, with respect, BIM didn't contribute at all to the job. And that was, it did for Mercury, who I know used it quite effectively, and for Acon, who designed it. But the day after, 13 ring main units, 12 transformers, 3.5 kilometres of cable, and a lot of digging. Thankfully, with no outages, because we were doing this dental work while the college was still operating. It was a BIM model that we haven't really used since that day. The Trinity Business School on the top left is the candidate job we're talking about now at the moment. But Feldon Clegg Bradley are BIM aware, and our team working on the E3, Dartry, Ready Architecture, our HABS project, a historic accommodation building project, is going to be a 320-year-old BIM project, and the 1712 building by Burr in the bottom left, Trinity Visitor Experience in our old library, will be a BIM level 2 deep retrofit as well, fairly expensive one, of the old library. Next in from the left on the bottom, under construction at the moment by Bennett's, who are using BIM 2, along with McCullum Mulvan, JV Tierney's and O'Connor Sutton Cronin. So we've got quite a bit on at the moment, and BIM is interesting to me. Now, I'm also not a Luddite. I would be regarded as the office nerd, actually. When it comes to this type of stuff, I'm very happy with the idea that we transformed our offices in Trinity when I worked here before, and also in NUI Galway, from using a pencil and getting the first roll in DPX plotter. You remember the ones that used to go and grab the pen and go and do a dot, and then go and put the pen back and grab another one and do those lines? People used to come and watch them in the office. So I'm quite happy with the idea of bringing new systems in to bring some, and I'm not getting old and cynical, I just have questions about the value of how BIM is working at the moment. So the business school, to talk through a couple of perspectives. The architect, Scott Colin Walker, did a fine job of taking the Foster-esque napkin sketch in the top right of the picture that was probably drawn on an airplane by David Cahill somewhere, and turning it into a fine building. But also we had some good quality survey and Matterport's scans done of the area to start establishing the baseline for it. This obviously rapidly evolved into the BIM model. And later on I have a small diagram which I drew, although the colour coding got a bit screwed up, about where BIM is successful for me. And certainly in the planning and construction phases, I think there's a good bit of success in some areas, but there's some horrific failures, unfortunately, and it's costing a fortune, and I'm wondering where the value is going sometimes. Obviously, there's an awful lot, a huge amount of detail and pretty pictures that we can put up here, and if you're tired of pretty pictures, you're going to get even worse. However, where is the value going to come? And I'm going to put up the first challenge of near zero energy buildings. The business school was an NZ building. So this is a 60% dip on the energy performance, both thermal, electric and other carbon impact of buildings built in 2008 is now an NZ standard. And we have to reach this by law. And I'm much more interested in BIM making some contributions in this field than I would be in other areas, because I think there's been some efficiencies already brought to bear with database and object linking and embedding of databases over the past. So the mechanical and electrical, although this picture, as shiny as it is, looks more like a workshop floor, an American chopper, it is an awful lot of pipes and wires. Making sure things don't bang into each other is a huge part of BIM. Great. But when you have to switch off the clash detection because it can't understand the physics that I understand on site, it gets flaky. The examples we would have is a 2-inch pipe that's an inch away from a wall. Every man, woman and child knows you can stuff a piece of insulation in behind it, but BIM can't figure that out because it believes you can't squish stuff. Breaks the laws of physics, 500 clashes appear from floor to ceiling. We start switching clash detection off. These type of things start to get very difficult on site when somebody forgets to switch it back on again. So these are practical outputs that are affecting us at a higher level, especially when it comes time for claims management. And I appreciate the commercial package on the business school is now shut and that Radigans are in the audience. So I'm going to also say that the final account is agreed. Celine, don't forget that, please. But we have had an awful lot of money spent on this project, I think because of BIM, and not saved because of it, unfortunately. I'll come to that again. Again, the cynicism is right the way through my presentation. More M&E stuff and complicated stuff from BIM as well. All very helpful. Contractor's perspective. Now, I think the contractors have this nailed, right? It's excellent for them in terms of organizational, site management, BIM, whatever level you want to take it to. How even it manages loads and unloads from the road, busy road as it was on Pierce Street. I think the contractors have this licked, and it doesn't concern me, but I am always very aware when a contractor really jumps on a piece of technology, how it will benefit the client at the end of the day. However, an area that was interesting for us was progress and site work, and I know Radigans were very good at this. Whenever I asked for a progress pack, I got back, instead of getting a book of A3 general arrangement drawings or a pair of 3D goggles, I didn't mind which, I got back loads of blank pieces of paper where the Kobe data drop hadn't occurred on time. And this gets very difficult when you're trying to run an €80 million job. Again, the contractor's perspective in coordination, I think worked very well, and compliments as well to Mick and Niall Stone in Designer Group and to Burks, who also use this with great effect. And the computer-assisted virtual environment that Designer Group have in their office is something to behold. It's extraordinary, and it was actually genuinely very useful. When I asked the question and put the challenge out to the group, who owns the parts of BIM? Whenever we ran aground with it and we found that somebody hadn't dropped something into the model, or the contractor was recording stuff on a set of paper drawings in his hut, and it wasn't being passed down to the right people, and in fact the model wasn't being used for the native entry point in BIM analysis. It was actually still going on paper first, and then it was going to another bit of paper, and then 5 people would gather these bits of paper in a meeting, and then somebody say, let's BIM it now. It was the wrong end, but that's perfectly natural. This is happening in the rain, by the way. So it's perfectly natural that this is the order of things, but who owns the sections of those BIM model components and who owns it overall? So aware that I am, I've only got a few minutes left. I wanted to start talking about the pros and cons. I think I'm probably going to hear today that clients don't know what they want. And there's a load of clients in the audience. And I would put it to this room that we know exactly what we want. And we also know exactly what we want out of BIM. And before BIM, we knew exactly what we wanted out of integrated workplace management systems. And before those, we knew exactly what we wanted out of computer-assisted facilities management systems. But when the snake oil salespeople turned up at the door, selling BIM this, glue that, Revit this, Collaborator that, a doodle, a doddle, buzzsaw, my eyes don't have to glaze over. I have to try and see around them to see where the real value is. So where does the money go? So we probably spent around €2.5 million on the BIM model. That was an estimate that Turner Townsend did for us on the business school. And I am still struggling to tell our provost that we got €2 to €2.5 million worth of value out of that in the project. I'd like somebody to show it to me. Because if it's embedded in the nails and the screws that I handed over to my Stollert, head of facilities and services, who's now stripping the model back with an and to something that is simple, so it can be used in plumbing and electrical work and asset management and connected as real estate management. Then I'd love to find out where the millions went. Consultants cost more on the project because they asked for more because the BIM was complicated. I found an irony in that. The irony wasn't lost on me. And it all comes down to operations and how we coordinate the model in the end. But I do believe that the naming convention in BIM, there was Peter's in the audience somewhere, helped me greatly at the start of the project in developing an employer's information requirement document, which highlighted to me at the time that I needed to wait to see how we resource it in the office, but also that naming conventions and documentation coordination was critically important. So this diagram on the right unfortunately got screwed up in translation onto the colours. But where do we think it might be working? The model on the left is a general success model for projects, is that the teams deliver models, the teams deliver buildings. It's not, gravity is probably my only real cruel moment. It's like something, life just put one brick on top of another, that's all I do every day. But on the right hand side, the user brief and the operations section are red for me. This is a green, amber, red diagram in the original one I had. So I believe the user brief, the most important part, I think BIM is not succeeding from my office's perspective in helping users articulate what they want from assets. I think planning and design and construction are green in the model I had. I believe that it is, certainly there is plenty of capacity for BIM to do an awful lot more heavy lifting there. And in terms of installation, operation and performance qualification of equipment, controls, and hard and soft facilities management, that's amber for me at the moment. I think the equipment coordination is getting better. Still seeing errors. Only yesterday I was just talking to Dan about it. A project which shall remain nameless. There were 250 repetitive, expensive components in this building. They had to be sized. We saw the control sample. We made observations on the control sample. Those observations were marked up onto a set of master drawings. They didn't get translated into BIM. They were all made in Russia to the previous design, and they all arrived on site wrong. They're all being sent back. So BIM failed us there in this particular installation. On the operation 24/7 of a project, and it is the biggest circle and it is red for me in here, 5% of the project value goes into the built environment at the start. Your construction fees, your demolition, your design team fees to wine and cheese section, that's about 5%. The cradle to grave, the other 95%, is where the real money goes. And I'm finding it really difficult to take this 0.5 terabyte of data and convert it into something useful. As the plumbing supervisor in our office, who's not also a Luddite, he looked at this fancy laptop, and Celine came in and presented to say, this is what Radigan's will be giving you in the end. We said, that's wonderful. Can I laminate it and stick it to the boiler house wall? Because at the moment, it's not as useful as you think it might be. So I think the operation, people are being let down by BIM at the moment, and I'd like to challenge this room to do something about it, if you don't mind. And I think that's where the real value of the 2.5 million can, on the business school, can come out of. So no pressure, and then to convert that. Can BIM help? But I think the next phase of NZ, the next phase of our energy management, we're all beholden to do something about the environment. We don't have to lecture people on the environment anymore. I'm being lectured by teenagers on the environment, and I'm embarrassed about it, and we need to do something about it. My daughter is the best lecturer on environmental. I bring her into the E3 project in a heartbeat, because she can tell me exactly what she wants out of the world when I'm finished wrecking it. So these graphs are thankfully beginning to go the right direction. The first dotted purple graph on the, very difficult to read the slide, I apologise, maybe that's intentional from my perspective, but that's where it would have gone if we hadn't brought NZ in. Greenhouse gases are on the shift down, thankfully, in the built environment. We have a dotted section now by 2020 to get through if we get our targets by 33%. And then the green will continue to 2030 and then to zero greenhouse gases by 2050. Now, if BIM is really going to make an impact in my professional perspective, it makes it here. And the operations of the buildings, the coordination of the built environment at the end of the building process is where the real value can be hit. Environmentally, societally, financially. So yes, focus on where the pipes and wires go during the building process. But you know what? To be honest, if you said to me tomorrow, bin's broken, it's not available to do the next building, we'd move on. It'll be fine. We've done it before. We know one brick on top of another. That's what I tell them. But when it's out the tail end, we need a database. Whether we write it down, we record it in Excel, we have a CAFM system or an integrated workplace management system or a digital twin. That's where the asset value begins to pile up. So the best part of my presentation is the end, because I'd like to introduce Roger, who's the real expert in the field. I just sign checks, really. So Roger's just the brains and an and follow as well. Thank you very much.